Are your plants ready for the winter? Is your yard in a position where it's going to survive or thrive or demise? Well, hopefully today I can give you some simple tricks to help you so that your yard, your garden, your landscape will be beautiful next year just as it has this year. It's been a dry summer. There's a lot of plants that are suffering going into the winter, and if you take some steps and prepare right now, you're going to find that your plants are going to survive better through the winter so that next spring you'll get the growth and the flowers and the beauty of those plants. And today we're going to talk about how to protect the plants for the upcoming winter, whether to prune or not to prune. We'll talk a little bit about how animals create a lot of damage through the upcoming winter, whether it's voles and mice or rabbits and deer. And then we'll talk a little bit about the lawn and the vegetable garden and what steps you should take to get it ready for the upcoming winter. And if you have questions during this whole process, we have the chat down below, so you can feel free to ask. And if I didn't answer the question, I can follow up with an answer. So the first thing I want to talk about is that we're in a drought. Throughout the whole state of Massachusetts, New England, actually the whole East Coast, there's been no rain to speak of. If these plants don't get any rain or snow in the next 6 or 8 weeks, because we don't have any, these plants could come through the winter with some dead leaves, dead branches. We don't know what to expect. So the first thing I think you all should realize is that watering is important right up until the ground freezes solid. Now that might be once a week, it might be twice a month on existing trees, shrubs, but you don't want to just not water, especially on plants that you planted this year or even last year. It's really important. If it's a plant that even loses its leaves, it still wants some moisture around the roots so that it will thrive next year. There's different methods of watering when we don't have irrigation. We have a watering bag, which is sold like this. So it has a little cone shape. You fill the top of the bag with water, and there's little drip bomb areas on the bottom, so the water drips out. There's also one that looks like a inner tube for a tire that's oval that can go onto evergreens. Both of these are great methods of getting water to areas in your yard where you can't actually bring a hose. So this is one thing that I would recommend. If you still have the ability to grab a hose off the side of your house or whatever and water your plants, I do recommend you do that. The second thing you can do is you could put mulch around the plants. Mulching about 2 to 3 inches is what we typically recommend during the growing season. It's okay during the fall into the winter to go even 4 or 5 inches, but just remember in the spring to pull back the mulch before it starts growing again to 2 or 3 inches. But that mulch will hold onto some moisture during drier periods and give it back to the plant, and it will also insulate the roots during the freeze-thaw cycles we have. Mulching will help give your investment in your landscape an added edge to surviving through the upcoming winter. Now I want to talk a little bit more about pruning and how to and when and all that. First off, it's not recommended to prune any trees or shrubs at this time of the year. Really want to have a hard frost. When you have a hard frost, it shuts the plant down. If the plant gets pruned before a hard frost or even with its first hard frost, it may stimulate new growth that could be subject to some cold weather and die off. So no pruning really until it's been cold enough for a period of time. If you have dead branches, dead flowers, certainly those can be pruned off and can be pruned off wherever you want. So I have in back of here some roses and hydrangeas that I wanted to talk a little bit about pruning. So there's 5 different families of hydrangeas. The panicle hydrangeas have that cone-shaped flower that you saw blooming through August into September. They bloom on their new growth. So don't the arborescens family. So those actually, you can prune off the dead flowers now and get rid of them. That's not going to hurt the plant. So just cut those dead flowers off. You can go throughout the whole plant and just do that. But the best time to really give this a heavy haircut would be sometime in late winter, early spring. So I usually prune mine in March or April. And literally, you can prune this back at that time of the year almost to 50% of the plant. So what we want to do is, cut it back hard so that all of this would be gone and only what would be remaining is about half that plant. And that's going to encourage more growth and more flowers for next season. Your macrophylla hydrangeas, they bloom on old wood and new wood. So these flowers that you see here, if I go ahead and cut those off, that's fine. No problem pruning those off. But any of this growth that's here is going to start to emerge and continue to grow if I do any more pruning than that. And I don't want that. Now this is a flower bud that's going to be forming for next year. And next spring, That may flower or it may not flower. And how hydrangeas bloom is on their new growth and old growth. So a lot of the flowers you see here are the new growth that came out. The old growth, which is this part right here, should flower next June, next June. But if the winter temperatures are too cold, it may fry that bud, and next year there won't be any flower and this stick is totally dead. Okay, so what you want to do is just go through and systematically just cut off any of those dead flowers so that way they're not located on the plant during the winter time. Roses, again, are plants that be best pruned in that late winter, early spring period. You can see this rose has got plenty of foliage on it. It has not shut down. If I start to prune this back, it's going to want to blush out with new growth, and if we have a cold night, that new growth will get affected by it. So really what we want to do is wait until this rose has totally shut down. Maybe the flowers are not coming out anymore. Maybe the leaves have turned brown. Leave it alone. Certainly I can go through and prune off any of the dead flowers if I want, but any heavy pruning would be done sometime in late winter, early spring. We have videos on our library about rose care that Suzanne Thatcher did. We have a hydrangea video that Peter Meza did. I've done plenty of videos as well. So if you go back into our library, you'll be able to see some of those videos that could help you with some questions relating to pruning and care of hydrangeas and roses. So another way that we can keep our plants healthy through the winter is to try to keep the critters away from feeding on them. Now, when we don't have any snow, there's usually ample food for some of these smaller animals like bunnies, voles, mice to feed on things that are apparent. As soon as the snow comes, we start to see that certain areas of your yard and your landscape are protected from the snow, and the animals now have to search for food elsewhere. So there's different products that are available to keep your plants safe so that they don't feed them. One of the things that you can do to keep voles and mice away from getting at the trunks of trees is by putting a plastic tree guard around the tree trunk so that way it prevents the mice from feeding on the bark of the tree. So if you have any fruit trees or ornamental trees like cherry or dogwood or crabapple, I would recommend putting this around there before the winter weather starts to set in. And then in the spring, just remove this, save it, and use it again next year. The other thing that you could do is put repellents around the tree to prevent them from getting at the tree. For animals that are small, rodents, things like moles, voles, bunnies, the Mole Max is a great product. They digest it. When they go back to their burrow, it doesn't smell very good after they've relieved themselves, and they decide to move off to another location. And that's the intent, is not to kill them, but to try to find a new location for them to reside, hopefully not in your backyard. So that's how the Mole Max works. You can also put some repellents down or on the ground that have a minty smell, and that will get into their paws. And then when they clean themselves, they'll smell that and get an allergic reaction and then move off as well. Then you get into the larger animals like the deer and the bunnies that our tendency is to look for food wherever they can. Typically deer have a path they carry themselves on every night, but occasionally if there's no food in the area they're walking, they'll start to move somewhere else, and probably to the flowers or shrubs or trees that you have, even as close as your front door. So there are different groups of repellents that we have. You want to use these repellents on a frequent basis, maybe once a month. Alternate the different repellents so that they don't get used to it. The repellents will do one of two things. It will create a fear factor to prevent them from attacking your plants, or it will have a taste or a smell factor where they just don't like it. So we have a few products that are available in a spray bottle. All three of these are more of a taste thing. So they go up, they browse, they eat it, they don't like the taste, they remember not to go back and eat it again. So if you have an animal that's feeding on your rhododendrons, let's say, you would want to use maybe the Deer Barbex deer repellent this month, and next month go to the liquid fence, and then the following month go back to this. So you're kind of alternating them, okay? The Repelzo is a granular, so you sprinkle that in front of the plants, they get it in their paws, they don't like the smell, and they move on. The deer scram and the shake away coyote urine are smells that they are fearful of, and they move on to another part of your yard or a neighbor's yard or what have you. And the last thing that we have is we do have a deer netting, which you can put around the outside of your plants to prevent the deer from getting at the plants. I highly recommend, with the warm weather we're having, to get out there and start to figure out what is the best solution and get it fixed now, so that that way all those plants that are in your landscape are going to be healthy for you for next year. Going back to the past month, with the conditions being on the drier side, there may be some plants that are not as leafed out or as tasty, so they may start to look for alternate sources, hopefully not your plants that you cherish so much in your landscape. So we're getting into that time of the year where we're going to look at what we want to do with our lawns and our vegetable garden. Some people have had a hard frost and their vegetables have died. What do you do with the dead tops? What do you do with your soil? So let's talk a little bit about that. So the first thing you want to do is keep the tops and put them in your compost pile. Rake up your leaves, put those in your compost pile. And we have a product called the Biospoma, the compost starter, which helps to give the microbes that are going to be involved in the decomposition of all that yard waste, so that you'll have some compost product next year to blend into your garden the following season. You also want to apply some kind of a cover crop. Whether you have a raised bed or just an open soil area, a cover crop is used to grow and hold the soil in place so you don't have soil erosion and lose all that healthy soil that you've been adding all the compost and manures to the last year or so. And you want to make sure that that soil stays in the same location so it doesn't erode. We have smaller packets of the cover crop available. There's a pea and oats and a buckwheat. We also have winter rye, and you just blend that in like you're planting any kind of seeds. They'll grow even through the cold winter, and then in the spring you just turn them back into the ground. It's referred to as a green manure. It will give the soil some added life for the next season. So that's what you want to do with your vegetable garden. Now the question comes up, what should I do with my lawn or any plants that I have in my landscape? Can I still fertilize? If you want to fertilize any of your shrubs, your trees, anything that has foliage on it, you certainly can do that. We recommend using something with potassium. So this is a product that's just got potassium. That's the third number on a bag of fertilizer. Potassium is a strength and booster element for plants to give them endurance through the upcoming winter. And if you apply that to your soil, the plant still will take it up and use that to help it through the upcoming winter. For your lawns, you're probably not needing to fertilize your ground if you can't irrigate, because you do want to water it in. But if you can irrigate, you could use the Jonathan Green Winter Survival, the Espoma Fall Fertilizer, or you could use the Milorganite fertilizer. The Milorganite is a slow release fertilizer, and there's some people who say that the Milorganite will keep the bunnies and the deer away from your landscape. They don't like the smell. So you can have that as almost a repellent plus fertilizer, and it's a slow release. It will add some life to the soil. Does not smell like mint though. Okay, and the last thing is we have a product called Love Your Soil. The benefits of that is it actually takes salt that's stagnant in the soil and releases it so it moves through the soil structure so it doesn't stay and do any burning. So let's say you have an area where there's a sidewalk strip where you anticipate road salt. By applying the Love Your Soil around those plants, it will help to prevent that salt burn that could happen on your shrubs, your lawn, whatever plants that are in contact with any kind of a high amount of salt. Female dog urine is typically very high in salts. This will actually do the same thing. So if you have a dog that's causing some brown spots in your lawn, take a little handful of this, sprinkle it in the area, and all of a sudden the grass that was there will regrow and fill in because the salt is not there burning the roots of the plant. So that's another fun fact that I found that's very helpful. So fertilizers need to be watered in, and you want to make sure that there's adequate moisture in the soil. So if we don't get any rain, it could be that the fertilizer burns the roots of the grass. Then you're doing a detriment, you know what I'm saying? I haven't fertilized my lawn for this fall yet for that reason. If we had rain come through, then I would definitely do it, but we don't have rain, so I'm concerned that I might have brown lawn because it's gonna be looking for water in the ground and it's picking up all the nutrients and that's burning the roots. That's how the burn occurs. So So I want to say that you can fertilize, but I don't want to say you can't, you know what I'm saying? We don't know what the winter's going to bring us. We don't know if it's going to be warm and mild like last year, where we have a little bit of snow, some rain, or we're going to have cold biting winds, or we're going to have freeze-thaw temperatures. We just don't know what to expect. So we're going to protect our plants for the upcoming winter, and there's different ways that the plants get affected by the weather. The first way is we have warm days, maybe it's 40 or 45, and then we have cold nights, maybe it's 20, 25, and that warm day to cold night back and forth freezes and thaws the soil, causing some root damage, which then affects the top of the plant next season. The second way that we could have some damage is if we have any snow that's collecting in front of the plants, especially on the west side, because in the winter, the sun is lower to the earth, so you got the sun reflecting this off the snow and then causing the front of that plant to be warmer during the day. So even if it's 40 degrees, it could feel like 50 or 60 degrees. And then if we have 20 or 25 at night, it's even a bigger difference of cold temperatures. And the third way that the damage can occur is from just the winds. So the winds dry out the moisture that's in the foliage. So if a plant doesn't have leaves, obviously that's going to be fine. But if it has a smaller needle or a smaller surface area, there's less opportunity for burn. If it's a leaf that's larger, like a rhododendron, andromeda, those things could probably get more burn than a juniper, which is a needle evergreen, or a cypress. So I'm standing right next to a boxwood here. It's a smaller size leaf, yes, but it still has the potential for the wind to dry it out during the winter. So there's a couple of methods to protect it from the winter. The first method, which I think is the smartest method, is to apply a product called Wilt Stop or Wilt Proof. We have them both in the garden centers. What it is it's a product that has a waxy substance that covers the cuticle or the foliage of the leaf. So imagine if this is the leaf and you spray this on the leaf, it protects it so that when the wind hits the sides of the branches and the leaves, it doesn't cause the moisture to leave the leaves. And this is something that typically will last right through the winter. Sometimes it does break down, so I do recommend applying it sometime in November. It has to be a 45-degree or warmer day. And then we get that January, February thaw. So maybe in mid-February, do it again. Again, it has to be 45 degrees. And that will protect it through the rest of the winter into early March, mid-March, so that hopefully by the end of March, you don't have any more cold biting winds and the ground is actually waking up from the winter. This is available in a concentrate, so you can spray it, or it's available ready to spray. And it literally is just like a spray. So you just take and spray it right onto the leaves, just like that. And what's gonna happen is it create a little bit of a glossy sheen, so you know it worked. And basically it just covered all that foliage. So now if any wind comes there, it's a barrier to drying out the leaves. If I didn't spray part of it, like this part here which is not sprayed, there's a possibility that this leaf would be nice and green next year and this could turn brown. The other method to protecting plants is by putting burlap around it. So we have burlap in rolls, you just open it up. I've seen people take the roll of burlap and actually wrap it around the shrub. That's actually what I don't recommend, because the plant's still actively growing. You don't want the plant to have that kind of heaviness of burlap wrapped around on it, because it's gonna suffocate it. So what I recommend you do is get a couple of stakes, open up the burlap. I stapled it onto the stakes with a staple gun. Drive the stake here, drive the stake here, drive it in the ground, and then voila, you've got a nice screen, which could actually act as a buffer for deer as well. And what's gonna happen is the wind's gonna slightly go through this, but it's gonna break the wind so you don't have that desiccation. Now, personally, I feel if you're gonna go through this step and do it every year, you might as well not have this plant where it's in a windy location. So the first thing is always plant the right plant in the right location so you don't have to do this. The Wilt Stop obviously doesn't require hiding the foliage, and we're planting plants for the winter interest. So why would I want burlap in front of any shrubs when I could have just the natural beauty of the plant? So between the burlap on stakes or the Wilt Stop, and then maybe some additional mulch around the base of the plant, hopefully those will be ways to prepare the plants for the upcoming winter. Another way that you can protect your plants from the winter is the snow load that could potentially damage the plants. Now we have different products that are available to help you with that. We have a cone-shaped, almost looks like a mini pop-up tent that you can place over your shrubs, and that will cause the snow to slide. We have a one that's like a big white fabric bag that you can place over your plant. I've seen people build their own A-frame structures as well. It's okay to also put some jute twine around your shrubs if you feel like there's going to be some heavy snow load. So jute twine is a natural twine, so it does decompose. So in the spring, if you forget to go out there and remove it, it's not going to cause the plant to die. And you just want to tie it on a branch and just kind of go around the plant, and you want to try to just hold the branches up. So I'm not going to go, I don't want to go this tight. That's not healthy for the plant. I want to have it so that it's going to breathe. So something like this is going to be a lot better, so that way I'm going to keep the snow from getting in there and doing some major damage if it gets in there. So it's not like this is going to be a total supportive thing, but it's keeping it so that maybe the snow will come off in between it. But the worst thing would be for me to see in the spring that I didn't do anything like this, like the one next to it, and all of a sudden the snow comes down and breaks that branch off. Now I have a big open hole, and I'm not happy because that's going to take away from my landscape. So certain plants have more of a vertical branching structure. Those are the ones that you probably want to take the twine and tie it up. We learned about pruning hydrangeas, we learned about roses. Perennials and grasses are another category of pruning, and when should I and when shouldn't I. So we want that hard frost to happen so that it's completely dormant. Perennials should be cut right down to the ground level. They'll survive the winter in most cases, come back the next spring. A lot of times people will put mulch around them, like a straw or hay. That will give them some insulation through the upcoming winter. You certainly can do that. The question that comes up to me a lot is, should I prune my ornamental grasses? And there's no wrong answer here. The first way you can leave it is, enjoy the winter interest. Isn't that beautiful? So the grass foliage is brown, the flowers are dried up. As you can see, it can sway in the wind, so it does give you some winter appeal. You can leave this plant just like this is until early spring, late winter, and cut it right down to the ground level. That's if you choose to want to do that. The advantages of doing that is to enjoy the winter interest. However, we know that we're going to get some kind of snow event. And all of a sudden, the snow comes in and lands in here and flattens the grass. And then it looks just like that, where it's falling down, opening up, the branches have broken, and then we get some windy days and we get what's called the tumbleweed effect, where those small branches start blowing in the wind and distributing themselves all over your yard, in between some of your shrubs in the landscape, or in areas where you don't want them to. So that is the disadvantage with keeping it through the winter time. But if you want to keep it, you can. Otherwise, cut it to the ground now, or wait until the spring and do it then. There's no wrong answer. My name is Jim Connolly. I want to thank you for listening in about how to winterize your garden and your lawn for the upcoming season. It is important. We winterize our vehicles, we winterize our house, so why not our garden, so that the investment in our landscape will be there for the future. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, you can look at our library of all the different videos that we have that might help you enjoy the rest of your garden. And if you'd like to subscribe, please do, so you can get more important videos just like this one.